Hello and welcome to C-Suite Secrets. I'm Heather Parsons, your host. I'm a serial entrepreneur, fractional CFO, and a business strategist. Spent years juggling business, family life, while helping entrepreneurs scale, optimize cash flow, and build real financial success. On our show, we bring you real conversations with founders, executives, and operators that are actually moving the needle in the business. No fluff, no filler, just smart strategy and systems that work and insights that you can put to use in your business right away. With that, let's dive in. Today, we have Jason on the show. Jason, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So we're glad you're here. For folks who haven't had a chance to get to know you yet, I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey as an entrepreneur and how you started your business.
Yeah, sure. I grew up around computers because my dad had a computer company. So when I was a kid, I spent a lot of time there and I was learning all about it. I was building computers when I was like 10 or 11 years old. Just got good at it. And then kind of out of school, entering the workforce, it just made sense to kind of enter the IT space. So with his help, landed kind of my first IT job and never really looked back from there. And that was in the 90s, back in the 1900s. So
as my kids would say, yeah.
Yep. And here I am like 25, 30 years later. Gosh, yeah. And then my company I started 15 years ago, back in 2010. It's been amazing. It's been a journey, definitely not without its challenges, but here we are 15 years old and have an amazing team, wonderful clients. It's really cool to be able to kind of look back on everything and see what we've done.
That's great. Well, we're glad to have you here, and talking about being in business that long. I'd love to hear what are one or two things that as an entrepreneur that you've done to make sure you beat that small business failure rate and kind of keep growing and get to where you are today.
I wish I knew all of the right things I did. I would say, I certainly made a lot of mistakes along the way, but what I learned is kind of cliche. We hear it all the time, but the truth is surrounding yourself with the right people. That's everything. And not just that, but of course, treating them well and serving them. I'm so grateful to have people that I get to work with that have worked with me for years. My second full-time hire ever is still here.
Wow.
So, the first one, he moved on to greener pastures. We stay in touch. But the second one, I hired her. She was very, very junior at the time, and now she's a director at the company. Really outstanding colleague and leader in the organization. So yeah, it's to me, it's about the people. It's always about the people. The trade, it comes second. The trade is the easier part for us, technology, cybersecurity, that we're really good at, we're really passionate about. But, there are a lot of people that are good at it. It's about having the right people that share the same values, that allow us to build a culture that can operate optimally. And I think without that's I would say that's one of the things that would lead to, business failure is when those things don't align.
That's a wonderful point. The shared values and creating that culture is really the foundation because you don't want people there who are serving your clients and doing all the things that don't really have those values or don't share your same vision. It makes life really, really tough. So I love that you're starting out with that. And that's the base for your business.
It helps. I put a lot of it to how I was raised, but it helps in the values that I was raised with, and I'm a fairly, I would say, kind of high empathy person myself. So then when I'm dealing with people that I get to work with, it matters a lot to me how they're feeling and how they're doing. Um, you know, I know of folks, I've worked with so many people over the years, and I know of certain people where it's like every time you see them, they're arguing with someone or they're complaining about someone, especially like an employee or whatever. And I I so rarely have those cases, especially now. Earlier on, definitely had some of the wrong people that kind of came and went in the company, but there are certain people out there that just seem to always have conflict with others, and I I would hate to have that life and to have that negative energy, but I think it's just having the kind of, I'm a big fan of servant leadership kind of style of, my job is to serve those that I get to work with, and so I think it's really about, I think a lot of it comes from the leadership, and it really needs to be genuine. And unfortunately, I think a lot of businesses struggle with that because ultimately a lot of leaders out there are maybe a little more maybe egocentric or maybe just focused on the numbers. And I would say that they're probably more savvy than I am with business, but at the end of the day, I think the resilience of having a culture that's going to get you through the tough times is far more valuable than that kind of financial savviness of cutthroat business that we see out there, so often.
That's for sure. And I think there's a big difference between being that cutthroat versus being savvy and having your numbers dialed in and saying, okay, I'm looking for a return on investment. If I work with Bill over here, is he going to give me that return? Versus actually caring, is Bill okay? Is Bill satisfied in his role? Like, what can we do to grow him so that he can meet the requirement? I think that's such a give and take in business, not just us doing for them and them, it's a two-way street.
There's there something that took me a long time to figure out, and I'm still kind of learning as I go, I would say, is the getting the real buy-in from the folks that you work with. In that, yeah, sure, I as a founder of the company, I care about the bottom line, I care about return on investment, I care about our recurring revenue and our EBITDA and all those things. Those are important numbers, those are important metrics, those are vital. But the key, I have found the key is to get everyone to care about those things, to really care about those things, right? For it to matter to them almost as much as it does to us leaders. Because when you do, and I'm pretty transparent about how things operate here. But when and there's certain things you're not going to want to share, payroll, HR type stuff, and all that. Got to be smart with it. But at the same time, I think if you get people to actually care about the business and see it as they're part of the business, this is part of them, and it comes in time. They're not going to get that. They're not going to feel that buy-in in week one. But they've been with you for a long time. Chances are they care a lot more than you think. And if you just open up to them a bit more and you let them in a bit more and you get them to buy into the goals a bit more, you'd be amazed at what they can accomplish for you. And that's kind of what's happened. Is here we have these wonderful people that work here that really do care about these things, and they're not cutthroat about it either. But when we all get together and we share the same goals, and part of those goals have to do with improving our profitability and all that stuff, then that's what makes it. I would say that's what makes a good company great in a lot of ways, but it also builds for a more resilient business and one that can survive the ups and downs of the economy and other types of events that that could disrupt.
Yeah, and that's a very good point, because I think, in the entrepreneurs that I talk with and the businesses that I work with, getting those goals put on paper, whatever they are, so that they can be articulated at all the levels, is one of the foundational pieces for operating a business. It's okay, do we have goals? What are they? How do they impact me, and why do I care? It really changes how people behave in an organization. Because if you, as the founder, if they're your goals and nobody knows, it doesn't change anyone's behavior.
Very true. Now, a lot of folks, they go to business school, they learn, the right way to do things. I did not. And so, I made a lot of mistakes along the way, and I've always been that person to make, I've always been bad at learning from other people's mistakes. I've always been the one to go and make them myself. Um, but, you learn how to pick yourself up better, and I think you build more resilience that way. But because for me, there was no like framework. Here's how you operate a business. It wasn't clear to me. One thing that really helped was as we started to adopt EOS. So off of traction, and we haven't fully implemented EOS here, although we really should. We're just, hasn't been the biggest burning fire for us, but we've implemented elements of it that have been very valuable to us. And having, vision tracking to, level 10 meetings to, rocks and different things that you can really, it gives you a framework. It gives you kind of, a way to operate your business. And, an entrepreneur operating system, right? That kind of, I think that's what it stands for. But so I'm a big fan of that. And I would say, for folks out there that are starting a business or are not yet past that point where it's like, is this going to work, or is this working? It could be a really good way of you kind of getting a handle on things. And so I think the book is Traction, right? That's the one that really dives into EOS, I'm pretty sure. But definitely very, very valuable element of what we've been able to do here to implement, somewhat implement that here.
And I think that's a great way to look at it too. And I love that you don't come at it from the traditional sense of, okay, I went to school, I followed this cookie cutter path, and this is where it led me. And I think that's a great testament to, being a good leader and figuring it out no matter what it is. And if folks don't, for me, whenever I talk about EOS, once you start having employees, that's when I think you need to start seriously looking at EOS, because you need a way to kind of track their progress, help them feel that what they're doing is valuable. And EOS has some great tools around that. I don't think it's a one size fits all. I think there's lots of different flavors of the Kool-Aid with EOS, but it's a great framework and tools that you can use there. You just go and pick the golden nuggets that you want and leave the ones you're not ready for.
Yeah, and you can always, it's iterative, right? You can mature upon it, and things can be additive, but yeah, having something to make sense of it all, because it's madness otherwise. There's another thing that I would say has been key for me. One, it's helpful that I'm a bit OCD. I'm very like super organized. If you could see my desk, you'd make fun of me for how clean it is. People always joke that, Jason never does any work because it's always like empty, but it's very much by design. And it comes down to actually another book, Getting Things Done. Who's that? David Allen, I think. But, and you don't need to read the book necessarily. There's a methodology to getting things done. And it's so simple, and it's just this kind of workflow, and you program your brain to follow it, and it makes sense. And it's something that has allowed me to be very ambitious, which I am, and I maybe too ambitious. But the whirlwind that we live in that we work in and live in is just ever increasing, right? And especially with email now. I mean, how many emails do we all get a day, right? So just having tools and having methods that can help you be better, and investing in your own self professionally through these different things, rather than just focusing on your trade. Because I've done a lot to focus on my trade as a cybersecurity professional, and what we get to do for our clients. That's kind of number one. But so much of it is inward. So much of it is just how can I be better at doing the things that I do every day? How can I be a better leader? Simon Sinek, I follow him. I love everything that guy has put out there. And I try to live by those by his teachings, I guess, if you will. Yeah, I think there's just so much value in and I guess I am learning from other people in that sense, but it took a long time for me to kind of get to the point where I can really appreciate and realize the impact these things have had on me and on our business.
That's wonderful. I love Simon Sinek as well. I love his philosophy and how his just approach, and something you said there definitely resonates with me around, as a leader, I have to keep growing. If I'm going to operate a business, I have to keep growing, whether that's, growing my business, growing my systems, growing my processes, or growing me as a person. So I think that's a great perspective and piece of advice. One question I have to kind of add to that, I'd love to hear something that you've implemented in your business in the last year or so that's helped with some of that.
I'm trying to think here. I mean, we've done a lot to go deeper with EOS at Greenlight, and we implemented Monday.com as a solution to help us achieve that. That's been really helpful. My assistant kind of operates in that more than I do even.
Yep.
I kind of live my day to day is more inside of course, email and Microsoft Teams and all the messaging type of things. But I organize things in an app called Todoist. I've used it for years. But you can integrate all of this stuff, and so it works out really nice. And as a technologist, I kind of geek out on that sort of thing. But yeah, I would say that's probably the more recent thing that we've done is Monday.com and just kind of going deeper with the EOS.
Wonderful. Yeah, I like Monday a lot. Any type of, I think CRMs and accounting, are like accounting tools and a lot of other things, gym routines. The best ones are the ones that you use. So just pick one that you'll actually stick with, keep it simple, and just start tracking what you're doing. And life gets a lot easier.
So I cannot believe one of the tools that I've used for years. I cannot believe that it's not more popular than it is. But I've turned so many people onto this tool, and I swear they should give me commission. If you get way too many emails and you just can't get through them all, and sure, we have our focused versus other inboxes and all these things. Check out SaneBox, sanebox.com, I think it is. I've had it for years, and you can do so much with it. It plugs into your email in the cloud, so you don't have to install anything on your computer or anything like that. And what I like about it is all the important emails end up in my inbox. All the emails that are junk and everything else can go into other folders, but you can program a lot of workflows. And so if you subscribe to the Getting Things Done methodology, both Todoist and SaneBox really help with both of those. And they just give me that ability to really organize. Again, I'm OCD, so I like to have a zero inbox. Like when I go to bed at night, my inbox is empty. It is empty. Yeah, the SaneBox is the way I achieve that.
So I think that's a great tool and a great tip. One of the questions that I have for you as well, since you are a cybersecurity professional, are tools like that secure?
Yeah, right. It's a great question. Here, SaneBox is plugging into your email. I would not go with it if it were just some random app that you found on an app store and you don't know anything about it. They've been around for, 10 plus years. They're well established. You can always check out their privacy policy. There's always one on the website. You can read reviews about it. Word of mouth is important, but it's also good to do your own research to a degree if you know what you're looking for. You want to be careful about some of the tools out there. I did a webinar probably a year ago on the AI meeting assistants, right? The Fathom, the Zoom one, and all those things. And it's like, wait, is this safe? And it was kind of the double-edged sword of it, right? Because it's tracking, like it's ingesting everything, and the reality is they're a lot safer than they were, in that there was a lot of pressure on a lot of these companies to not sell that data third party and all that. But at the same time, you have to be mindful of what are you putting out there. And sure, maybe they're not going to sell it, but what if they get hacked, right? So you have this whole supply chain risk that we have to worry about. And as you have sensitive things, and you got to ask yourself what is sensitive, and kind of classifying that information in a way. But in certain cases, you shouldn't be using certain tools. And those AI assistants are great for most meetings, but every once in a while you might have a meeting where it's a terrible idea. So be thinking about these things, be cognizant of what tools you're using and what the impact could be. Because I'm a big fan of efficiency and innovation and technology in general, but there is a double-edged sword to it, and people need to be more mindful of that.
So for somebody who's a layman, what are the top 1 or 2 things they should be looking for when they go to check out these tools to make sure that they're secure before they start using them?
I think that's a good question. I would say nothing's secure. So nothing. Everyone's getting hacked. Anyone's getting hacked. I'll put it that way. Okay. So our information's already out there. If anyone thinks that their social security number is actually secret, like, I hate to break it to you, it's very not secret. And go freeze your credit right now. Everyone should be doing that. And I'm not a financial expert, but I just know that you should be doing that. And I'm not a lawyer either, so if I say anything that sounds like legal advice, it is not. But I would say go into it with the mindset that nothing is secure. So if you are doing something sensitive, if you have sensitive information, be mindful of where that's going, of where that is. If you have really sensitive data or sensitive conversations, maybe you shouldn't be using these AI meeting assistants during those conversations. Maybe you shouldn't put that data somewhere that might be publicly shared or accessible if hacked by a third party, right? So just be mindful of that, because there's no way to know what's going to be secure. Anything could be hacked in theory. There are certain tools out there that are designed in a way that should be safe. And a good example would be like a good password manager, Password Vault. If you use like 1Password or LastPass or something like that, if they got hacked, technically there should be no way that hacker could see your passwords, because the key that is required to look at that data is something that you have, they don't have. And so there are certain types of technologies out there that should be safer than others, and that kind of design of a technology is, I would say, it's as good as we're going to be able to ask for, which could all change with quantum computing later. But for now, here we are. This is what we have, and I would say that you just got to be mindful of who are these companies? If it's just some app or browser extension, watch out for those. Those are major risk vectors now. I think it was around Christmas time, there were like 30 or 40 browser extensions that were found to be hacked that were really popular on Google Chrome. So you got to be really, really careful about what you're using, and I would say too, have an advisor of some kind that is a real cybersecurity professional that you can, run ideas by or take advice from.
That's a great point, around having somebody on your advisory board that understands technology and cybersecurity in general. So
cybersecurity in particular, which is different. I mean, I was in IT for years and years, but I didn't really pivot into cybersecurity till about maybe 8 years ago, and I mean, I didn't know enough before that. I did not. Now, it wasn't as important back then. It was kind of predates ransomware and kind of a lot of the risks that we see today. But I think one of the biggest mistakes that business leaders make when it comes to cyber risk is, well, assuming anything. First of all, assuming your IT people have it under control. They don't. They don't. And no knock against them. They're IT and it's different. To my point, you really do need to have cybersecurity professionals around you, and you need to have them involved. And there are many different companies out there like ours that provide that as a service to businesses. But be very careful, because just because someone came out of IT does not qualify them to be cybersecurity professionals, and in many cases makes them more dangerous because they assume way too much.
So is there a certificate? Like, how would you determine somebody is a cybersecurity professional?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, there are certifications out there. It's crazy. In my industry, I work a lot with folks in insurance, and insurance is a heavily regulated industry. We do a lot of consulting with cyber insurance groups, and learning about all the regulations around that, and they have to do certain things. But in my industry, whether it's IT or cybersecurity, there's no regulation. Any person could start a company, call it a cybersecurity company, provide cybersecurity services, and know nothing about cybersecurity.
Oh,
there's no barrier to entry. The person that cuts my hair has to go get a license to cut my hair. I don't need a license to provide cyber security services. So there's a big problem in our industry, I would say, and maybe lack of legislation. But so I'm really hoping we get somewhere with that eventually. But yeah, so be wary of that. But individuals can get certifications, and these certifications don't mean everything, but they mean something. And there are many out there that are not too hard to get, and there are a few out there that are very hard to get. The one I have is CISSP. Don't ask me to tell you what it stands for. I remember half of it, but that is kind of considered the gold standard of the kind of top one in the cybersecurity space. CISSP, CISM, those are two really, really good ones. And so for individuals to have those certifications generally means they've been doing this for a long time. They know a lot. I try not to call myself an expert, but at least I'll say I'm a professional, cybersecurity professional, because there's not too many experts out there. I would say it's a vast spectrum of knowledge you need to have.
That's great to know. I think one of the things that I run into a lot with entrepreneurs, especially around tech, is there's so many different choices. It's really hard to figure out which one to go with. So how do you figure out, what tools do you need? Who is an actual professional? And it becomes overwhelming. So if you have any tips or suggestions on how to narrow the playing field, whether it's in cybersecurity or tech in general, I'd love to hear that.
Well, it's interesting because even in my industry, we've seen a lot of change over the last probably 5 or so years since COVID, since kind of the advent of ransomware, especially seeing the impact of it in small businesses, and really forcing IT professionals, MSPs like ours, to pivot into cybersecurity in some way and be able to kind of offer that as a service to their clients. So what's happened is folks in my space typically learn about cybersecurity through vendors, software vendors that have something to sell, that have a product that solves a problem. And what ends up happening is they end up getting all these different tools that don't work together. Or there are some tools that are kind of all in one, but they're not necessarily that good. And either way, you're kind of going down a rabbit hole, and I would say a very slippery slope, because where does that end? And it does not. And so I would say if you're working with an MSP that is saying you're good, you're safe, they're not doing a good job. If you're working with one that every single time they talk to you, all they talk about is cybersecurity, well, then I think you need a change. You need something different, and it could be you, it could be them, but something needs to change, because your IT should be a source of innovation. You should be working with IT folks to figure out how can you be more innovative, especially with AI today. Like, if you're not having those conversations and figuring all that out, you're going to be left behind. Don't think that this is coming later. This is here now, and we all need to be really, really, in front of this if we're going to kind of survive this wave. But I think the key is, and what I would say the vast majority of folks in the IT industry are starting to realize, is it's not so much about going and buying more and more and more and more products to be protective, because they're just band-aids, right? It's about re-architecting your environment to be more secure by design. And when you do that, you can reduce the number of tools you need, the amount of spend you have. It was only a few years ago I used to advocate that you need to have your IT budget and your cybersecurity budget. I was advocating for that. And now, no, I say, no, your IT should be secure by design. You should not have email if it's not set up, with optimal security. Just don't have it then. It shouldn't be allowed, and that's the case for any technology. It's just, you gotta re-architect these things in a way where you're using what we call zero trust principles, principle of least privilege. These are fundamental elements of cybersecurity that are vital. And even then, you're never 100% safe. No one is, but you significantly reduce the likelihood and impact of cyber risk when you practice these things. And you want to work with folks that understand, zero trust security, and with some defense in depth, which would be some of the additive layers. But it's really just having a trusted advisor, someone that put a seat at the table for the right person to sit there and be part of the conversation.
That's some great advice. I think, learning about what zero trust security is, what to look for, and really building out your advisory board to have a security specialist on is going to be super helpful for most entrepreneurs. Yeah. This has been a great conversation. One final question that I have for you is, as you have been on your journey as an entrepreneur, what is one secret you wish you would have known starting out as an entrepreneur?
I wish I had known how to say no more.
Oh, okay.
I think that probably resonates with a lot of folks that have been doing this for a while. But when I started the company, I used to say, I'll wash cars for my bill rate. I don't care, right? Like, yep. Yeah, you got to put food on the table, and that's fine. It makes sense at a point, and then at a point it does not. And my favorite business book of all is called The Pumpkin Plan by Mike Michalowicz. And it became popular in my industry, I think because the author used to own a company in our space. But it's the premise of it is that you and it's a silly name for a book, but when you read it, you'll understand why. But the premise of it is you want to build a business focusing on one thing that you do great. And so in order to do that, you really need to cut off. In order to grow the biggest pumpkin on the vine, you need to cut all the other pumpkins off that vine. So all the nutrients go to that one pumpkin. Knowing what to cut, knowing when to cut those, it's hard. to do. You can't just go and do it when you count on those streams of revenue and all that. It can't be abrupt, but it has to be strategic. You have to be thinking in those terms. You have to be able to say no to certain clients. I'll leave you with this. Your clients can either be cheap or they can be assholes, but they can't be both.
Very true. That's a great point. You know, I definitely can appreciate what you're saying about saying no. I talked a lot about that not very long ago. And I think it's not just for your bottom line, it's also for your sanity as a human. Whenever you're working for those people who, regardless of the bill rate, are a little bit more difficult or are an asshole, it's not the most fun thing to do. So getting that freedom of relationship on top of getting the money is where the magic's at.
That's right.
Well, I definitely appreciate it. And before we wrap up, if our listeners would like to connect or learn more about what you're working on, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, you can check out our site, greenlightcyber.com, and just reach out and make mention of the podcast, and I'll be sure to connect with you through that.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you to everybody for listening. So if you found today's episode as valuable as I have, be sure to hit that like and follow button. And until next time, keep moving forward. And remember, you don't have to do this alone.